The Song from Heartland Ridge. Chapter 1. Welcome to Heartland Ridge. Heartland Ridge Ranch woke before the sun. Long before the first golden light touched the mountains, the ranch was already alive with movement. Truck doors closed, horses shifted in their stalls, coffee steamed from metal travel mugs, and somewhere beyond the main barn, Wyatt Ridge was already working. That was how everyone knew the day had officially begun. Wyatt was 39, tall, broad-shouldered, and respected by every man and woman on the ranch. He owned Heartland Ridge with his wife, Charlie, but he never acted like the work belonged to someone else. If a fence needed fixing, Wyatt was there. If cattle had to be moved, Wyatt rode with the crew. If a storm rolled in at midnight, he was the first one out the door. That was why his ranch hands followed him without question. Not because he demanded loyalty, because he had earned it. By 6 o'clock, Charlie Ridge stood on the porch of the main house with a mug of coffee in each hand. She was 37, graceful, warm, and the kind of woman who made a house feel like home before she even said a word. Wyatt walked up the steps, dust on his boots and sunrise behind him. Charlie handed him a mug. "You already fixed the north gate, didn't you?" Wyatt took the coffee and kissed her cheek. "Yes, ma'am." "You were supposed to wait for Caleb." "Caleb was supposed to sleep past 5 for once." Charlie smiled. "You're impossible." Wyatt leaned close. "But useful." She laughed softly, and he looked at her the same way he had since they were young. Like she was still the prettiest thing he had ever seen. Inside the house, the morning exploded. Ellie Ridge, 10 years old, came down the stairs fully dressed, hair brushed, boots clean, and manners ready. "Good morning, Mama." "Good morning, Daddy." Wyatt smiled. "Morning, sweetheart." Then came Sadie, 7 years old, wild curls, one boot untied, carrying a toy horse and looking like she had already made 3 plans and broken 2 rules. "Morning." Charlie raised an eyebrow. "Sadie Grace, why is there hay in your hair?" Sadie touched her curls. "Because Biscuit needed encouragement." Wyatt closed his eyes. "Is Biscuit the goat?" Sadie nodded. "He was sad. He lives in the barn. He wanted breakfast with family." Before anyone could respond, 4-year-old Bo marched into the kitchen wearing cowboy boots, pajama pants, and a hat far too big for his head. "When I'm big," he announced, "I'm running this ranch." Wyatt picked him up. "You are?" Bo nodded seriously. "After Mason." At the mention of his oldest son, Wyatt looked toward the back door. Mason Ridge was already outside, 17 years old and built like he belonged to the land. He worked beside the crew without complaint, fed horses, hauled hay, mended fence, rode hard, listened well. He said, "Yes, sir," and "Yes, ma'am." He looked after his siblings, and when Wyatt watched him, he felt 2 things at once: pride and the quiet fear every father knew. The fear that the boy was becoming a man faster than he was ready for. Mason stood near the corral with Caleb Brooks, the ranch foreman, checking a saddle strap. Caleb was steady, quiet, and loyal to the bone. "You sure you tightened that cinch?" Caleb asked. Mason checked it again. "Yes, sir." Caleb nodded. "Good. A horse'll forgive a lot. A loose saddle won't." Mason smiled. "I'll remember that." "You remember most things." Mason shrugged. "I try." Across the yard, one of the younger ranch hands called for help moving feed sacks. Mason went immediately. No hesitation. No complaint. That was Mason. The kind of young man people trusted before he even asked them to. But there was another side of him most people didn't see. A quieter side. One he kept tucked away like a secret. After morning chores, when the crew moved toward breakfast and the ranch settled into a brief hush, Mason walked up to a ridge overlooking the east pasture. He carried his old guitar. The one with scratches near the sound hole in a faded leather strap. He sat on the fence rail, looked out over Heartland Ridge, and began to play. The melody was soft at first, then warmer. A song about home, about sunrises, about a family built from hard work and grace. Mason sang low, thinking no one could hear him. But across the pasture, near the Willow Creek road, a girl on horseback slowed to a stop. She had been riding alone, following the fence line, when the music drifted through the morning air. She turned toward the sound. The sun rose behind the ridge, and there, silhouetted against the gold sky, was a cowboy with a guitar. She didn't know his name. Not yet. But she knew one thing. Whoever he was, he had just changed the sound of Heartland Ridge forever. Chapter 2, The Girl from Willow Creek. The next morning, Mason Ridge told himself he imagined it. The rider. The girl on horseback. The way she had stopped near the fence line while he played. Maybe it had been someone passing through. Maybe she hadn't even heard him. That explanation lasted until breakfast. Mason, Charlie's voice pulled him back. His mother stood by the stove holding a plate of pancakes. You've been staring at the same spot on the wall for 2 minutes. Ellie looked up from her orange juice. I timed him. Sadie grinned. I think he's in love. Mason nearly choked on his coffee. Wyatt lowered his mug. With who? Sadie shrugged. Don't know yet. Charlie laughed. Wyatt studied Mason. Mason immediately regretted everything. I'm fine. Wyatt nodded slowly. That's exactly what someone hiding something says. Even Caleb, sitting near the end of the table, smirked. There was no surviving this family. Later that afternoon, Charlie asked Mason to deliver supplies into Willow Creek. Feed supplements, medicine, a few boxes from town, simple enough. Mason loaded the truck and headed down the winding road toward town. Willow Creek wasn't big. One main street, a diner, a feed store, a small schoolhouse. The kind of place where everyone noticed when something changed, which explained why the entire town seemed interested in the new arrival. As Mason stepped out of the truck near the general store, he heard 2 older women talking nearby. She moved in yesterday with her aunt. That's what I heard. Yeah, pretty girl. Mason ignored them. At least he tried to. Then the store door opened, and his heart forgot how to behave. It was her, the girl from the ridge. She carried a paper bag in one hand and pushed loose hair behind her ear with the other. She looked up, saw him, paused. Mason paused too. For one long second, neither moved. Then she smiled. Not shy, not bold, just warm. And somehow that felt worse, because Mason suddenly couldn't remember how words worked. She stepped down from the porch. You're the cowboy with the guitar? Well, apparently she'd heard him. Mason cleared his throat. Yes, ma'am. The words slipped out automatically. Her smile widened. Did you just call me ma'am? His ears warmed. Yes, ma'am. That made her laugh. Real laughter. Bright and easy. I'm 17, not 80. Mason rubbed the back of his neck. Sorry. No, she said, still smiling. I kind of like it. That somehow made things worse. Much worse. She extended a hand. I'm Abigail Harper. Mason shook it. Her hand was warm despite the breeze. Mason Ridge. Her eyebrows lifted. Ridge? He nodded. As in Heartland Ridge? Yes, ma'am. She grinned. There it is again. He smiled despite himself. They stood there for a moment. Mason noticed something immediately. Abigail didn't seem intimidated by him. Most new people in town either treated the Ridge family like celebrities or like local legends. Abigail didn't either. She simply looked at him like he was him. And that felt oddly refreshing. So, she said, do you always sing to cattle? Mason laughed. Mostly horses. She tilted her head. Good audience? Quiet. I appreciate that. He liked her. That realization came too fast. Too easily. Dangerously fast. A truck pulled into the lot. An older woman stepped out and waved. Abby! Abigail turned. My aunt. She looked back at Mason. I should go. Mason nodded. Okay. She took a step backward, then stopped. Will you be playing tomorrow morning? Mason blinked. What? She smiled. The guitar. Oh, that. He tried not to look too hopeful. Maybe. She started walking toward her aunt, then turned one last time. I hope so. Mason stood frozen long after she left. His heart felt suspiciously loud. He didn't notice Caleb walking up behind him. Caleb crossed his arms. Interesting. Mason nearly jumped. How long were you standing there? Long enough. Mason sighed. Please don't. Caleb smirked. Don't what? Tell my dad. Caleb looked toward the road where Abby had disappeared, then back at Mason. Too late. Mason frowned. What? Caleb nodded toward the truck. Wyatt sat behind the wheel, watching, arms crossed, trying and failing to hide a grin. Mason closed his eyes. This was going to be a very long week. Chapter 3, The Boy with the Guitar. Mason barely made it through dinner. That wasn't because of the food. Charlie's pot roast was legendary. It was because Wyatt had been suspiciously quiet. And that was always worse. Much worse. When Wyatt Ridge had something to say, he usually said it. Silence meant he was enjoying himself, which meant trouble. Finally, Bo broke the tension. Daddy. Wyatt looked up. Yes? Why was Mason blushing in town? Mason nearly dropped his fork. Charlie froze. Ellie slowly lowered her glass. Sadie gasped dramatically. Oh my goodness, Mason stared at Bo. Why would you say that? Bo shrugged. Because you were. Traitor, absolute traitor. Wyatt leaned back in his chair. Interesting question. Charlie bit back a smile. Mason. He closed his eyes. There was no escape. She's new in town. Sadie bounced in her seat. A girl, Ellie looked thoughtful. What's her name? Mason sighed. Abigail. Charlie exchanged a glance with Wyatt. Mother's new. Father's noticed. Both were enjoying this far too much. Charlie smiled softly. She sounds lovely. Mason stabbed a potato. She is. The words slipped out before he could stop them. Silence. Then every single person at the table smiled. Even Caleb, seated nearby, failed to hide it. Mason groaned. I regret speaking. Wyatt finally laughed. A deep, genuine laugh. Son, he said, it gets worse. How? Wyatt took a sip of coffee. When she meets your mother. Charlie smiled sweetly. I'm very welcoming. Mason looked at Caleb. Help. Caleb shook his head. Can't. Why? Self-preservation. Fair. The next morning, Mason woke before dawn, not because of chores, because of nerves, which felt ridiculous. He'd worked cattle in storms, handled horses twice his size, helped pull calves in the middle of the night. Yet somehow one girl from Willow Creek had him unsettled. He grabbed his guitar and headed toward the ridge. Cold morning air filled his lungs. The ranch below still slept. He climbed onto the fence rail, then stopped. She was already there. Abigail sat on her horse near the pasture fence, waiting. Mason blinked. She smiled. You're late. He stared. You came back? Abby tilted her head. You sound surprised. I am. She dismounted gracefully and walked closer, boots crunching softly over frosted grass. I told you I hoped you'd be here. Mason felt his heartbeat pick up. You did. Abby nodded toward the guitar. So? Are you going to make me ask twice? He smiled. You're bossy. She grinned. I've been told. For the first time in a long while, Mason forgot to be nervous. He sat down, adjusted the guitar, and played. The melody flowed easier today, warmer, richer, because someone was listening. Someone who wanted to. When he finished, silence hung between them. Not awkward, just full. Abby looked at him differently now, like she'd learned something important. That was beautiful. Mason looked down at the guitar. Thanks. No, she said quietly. I mean it. Something in her voice made the words matter more. A lot more. She stepped closer to the fence. Did you write that? Mason hesitated. Then nodded. Abby's eyes widened. That was yours? Yes, ma'am. She laughed. There it is again. Mason smiled. She studied him for a moment, then asked the question he dreaded. Why don't people know about this? Mason looked toward the ranch below, the barns, the cattle, the trucks, his home. My music? Abby nodded. Mason was quiet. Finally, he answered. Because this matters more. He nodded toward Heartland Ridge. Abby followed his gaze. The ranch? My family. The answer came easily, because it was true, always true. Abby didn't respond immediately. Then she smiled. You know what I think? What? I think the right people can love both. The words landed somewhere deep inside him, because no one had ever said that before. And for the first time, Mason wondered, maybe she was right. Chapter 4, Under Western Skies. By Saturday afternoon, everyone at Heartland Ridge knew about Abigail Harper. Not because Mason told them, because Sadie had, repeatedly, to everyone. She likes Mason, Sadie announced while helping Charlie knead biscuit dough. Charlie smiled without looking up. Oh, Sadie nodded seriously. I can tell. How? Sadie shrugged. She smiles with her eyes. Charlie paused. That answer was surprisingly thoughtful. Before she could respond, Bo ran into the kitchen wearing his tiny cowboy hat. Mason's combing his hair. Charlie blinked. He is? Bo nodded. Twice. Sadie gasped. Oh, it's serious. Charlie laughed. Children missed very little. Outside, Mason checked the mirror of his truck for the third time, then immediately regretted it. This was ridiculous. He wasn't nervous. He had simply agreed to meet Abby at the Willow Creek Fall Festival. That was all. Not a date. Definitely not a date. Caleb walked by carrying rope. You're wearing cologne, Mason frowned. No, I'm not. Caleb sniffed. Yes, you are. Mason sighed. Please stop. Caleb smirked. Can't. The festival lit up Willow Creek by sunset. String lights hung between buildings. Music drifted through town. Food stands lined the street. Children ran between booths, laughing. It felt warm, alive, small-town magic. Mason spotted Abby near the church lawn. She wore jeans, boots, and a cream sweater. Simple, beautiful. His heart immediately forgot how to behave. She saw him and smiled, and somehow that smile felt like sunrise. You came. Mason gave a half smile. You asked. Abby stepped closer. Good answer. They began walking through the festival together. At first, conversation came easy. Music, school, family, town gossip. Abby laughed often. Mason discovered he liked making that happen, a lot. At one booth, a local musician played old country songs on an acoustic guitar. Abby slowed, then looked at Mason. You're better. Mason blinked. What? You heard me. He rubbed the back of his neck. You've only heard one song. She smiled. One was enough. The compliment landed hard, because Abby never sounded impressed, only honest. And honesty meant more. They stopped near the fairgrounds fence. The sun had fully set now. Stars filled the sky. String lights glowed overhead. Abby leaned against the wooden rail. Mason. Yeah? She studied him for a moment. Can I ask something? Sure. Why do you look like you're carrying the weight of the world sometimes? The question stunned him. Because nobody his age asked questions like that. And because she had seen him. Really seen him. He looked down, then out toward the dark pasture beyond town. Finally, he answered. Because someday this all becomes mine. Abby waited. The ranch. Mason nodded. Dad built something incredible. His voice lowered. What if I'm not enough to carry it? The words felt heavy once spoken, real, vulnerable. Abby didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped closer. Not enough to touch. Just enough to matter. Then she said quietly, Mason. He looked at her. I don't think your father sees someone trying to become him. She smiled softly. I think he sees someone becoming the man he hoped you'd be. Silence, the kind that changes things, because something inside Mason shifted. Not fixed, not solved, but lighter, as if someone had helped him carry part of the weight. From across the festival, Sadie's voice suddenly rang out. "Mason!" Both jumped. Mason closed his eyes. Of course. Sadie sprinted toward them with Ellie and Bo behind her. Bo pointed. "I told you." Sadie planted her hands on her hips. "So?" She looked between them. "Is this a date?" Mason nearly choked. Ellie whispered, horrified. "Sadie!" Abby burst into laughter. Real, uncontrollable laughter. Mason covered his face, and as Abby kept laughing beneath the western sky, he realized something unexpected. He would endure 1,000 embarrassing moments if it meant hearing that sound again. Chapter 5. When the weight feels heavy. The laughter from the festival stayed with Mason all weekend, especially Abby's. He heard it while feeding horses, while mending fence, while hauling feed. It followed him like a melody he couldn't stop replaying. Not that he minded. Much. Monday morning brought colder air and harder work. A section of fencing along the south pasture had been damaged during the night. By sunrise, Wyatt, Caleb, and Mason were already out repairing posts. The work was physical, heavy. Usually Mason liked that. Hard work quieted his mind. Today it didn't. Wyatt noticed. Of course he did. He always noticed. "You're quiet." Mason drove a fence post deeper into the earth. "I'm working." Wyatt adjusted wire. That wasn't an answer. Mason sighed. There was no point pretending with his father. Not when Wyatt could read him better than anyone. For several moments, only the sounds of work filled the pasture. Hammer strikes, wind through grass, distant cattle. Finally, Mason spoke. "Dad?" Wyatt didn't look up. "Yeah?" Mason swallowed. The question had been sitting in his chest for years. Now it came out before he could stop it. "What if I'm not enough?" That got Wyatt's attention. He straightened slowly. "What do you mean?" Mason looked toward the rolling hills of Heartland Ridge, the barns, the cattle, the land, everything his family had built. "This ranch." His voice tightened. "You built all this." Wyatt said nothing. Mason continued. "Everyone talks like I'm next." Because it was true. The crew trusted him. The town saw him as future leadership. Even his siblings looked at him that way. "I don't know if I can carry all of this." The words hung in the cold air. Raw, honest, scary. Caleb quietly moved farther down the fence line, giving them space, a gesture Mason noticed and appreciated. Wyatt removed his gloves, then leaned against the fence, not as the owner, not as the boss, as a father. "Mason," his voice was calm, steady. "When I was your age, I thought leadership meant never feeling afraid." Mason frowned. "What changed?" Wyatt smiled faintly. "Marriage." That earned a small laugh. "Good," Wyatt continued. "Then kids?" Another pause. "Then responsibility." He looked directly at Mason. "I learned something important." "What?" Wyatt's voice softened. "The men I trust most aren't fearless." Mason listened carefully. "They're the ones who feel the weight." Wyatt placed a hand on his shoulder. "And still choose to carry it." Something tightened in Mason's chest. Not pain, emotion, the kind that sneaks up on you. "You think I can do this?" The question came out quieter than he intended. Wyatt looked almost offended. "Son." He gave Mason's shoulder a firm squeeze. "I don't think you'll be me." Mason blinked. That wasn't what he expected. Wyatt smiled. "I think you'll be better." Silence. Mason stared at him. Wyatt continued. "You have my work ethic." Then he smiled. "But you got your mother's heart." Mason felt his throat tighten. Wyatt looked out across the ranch. "That combination will build something stronger than I ever could." The weight in Mason's chest shifted. Still there. but no longer crushing. Because for the first time, he understood something. His father wasn't asking him to become Wyatt Ridge. He was asking him to become Mason Ridge. And maybe that was enough. That evening, Mason sat alone on the ridge with his guitar. The sun dipped behind the mountains. Orange light washed across Heartland Ridge. He thought about his father's words, about Abby's words, about the strange peace both had given him. Then he began to play, slowly, softly, a new melody. Not about pressure, not about fear, about legacy, about love, about becoming. His fingers moved with growing confidence. Lyrics formed. Words he hadn't known were waiting. The song was finally coming together. And somewhere down the hill, Abby had just arrived at the ranch road. She heard the music, stopped, and smiled. Because even from a distance, she knew Mason had found something tonight. And whatever it was, it had changed his song. Chapter 6. The song from Heartland Ridge. Friday evening brought one of Heartland Ridge's favorite traditions, music night. It had started years ago with Charlie. Once a month, after a long week of work, the family, crew, and a few close friends gathered near the big red barn. String lights were hung between fence posts. A fire crackled in a steel pit. Charlie made enough food to feed half the county, and someone always brought music. Tonight, everyone seemed unusually excited. Mason knew why. His mother. He found Charlie near the porch arranging blankets. You told people. Charlie smiled innocently. Told people what? That I was playing tonight. She adjusted a folded quilt. I may have mentioned it. Mama. She looked up at him, warmth in her eyes. You're ready. Mason wasn't so sure. But arguing with Charlie Ridge rarely ended well. Nearby, Wyatt worked the grill while Caleb helped set up chairs. Bo ran through the yard wearing his hat. I'm going to play guitar too, Sadie gasped. Not before Mason, Ellie sighed. Sadie. What? You're yelling. I'm supporting, Ellie considered that. Fair. Mason shook his head. This family. As twilight settled over the ranch, guests arrived. Crew members, neighbors, friends from Willow Creek, and then Abby. Mason's heartbeat immediately changed pace. She stepped out of her aunt's truck wearing boots and a light denim jacket. Simple, beautiful. She saw him and smiled. There it was again, that smile, the one that somehow made the whole world feel quieter. Charlie appeared beside him without warning. You should breathe. Mason nearly jumped. Mama. Charlie smiled. She likes you. His ears warmed. You don't know that. Charlie gave him a look. Mason. She glanced toward Abby, then back at him. I was 17 once. Then she walked away, leaving destruction behind, as usual. An hour later, music night was in full swing. 2 ranch hands sang old country songs. Someone played fiddle. Even Wyatt sang half a verse before Charlie laughed too hard for him to continue. Then Caleb stood. The crowd quieted. Mason felt immediate dread. Caleb looked straight at him. Last song of the night. No, absolutely not, Caleb continued. Mason Ridge. The crowd applauded. Mason stared. Traitors, every single one of them. Wyatt nodded toward the stage. Charlie smiled proudly. Sadie shouted, You got this! Bo yelled louder. Play the good one. Mason closed his eyes, then stood. He walked to the microphone with guitar in hand. The world suddenly felt very still. The fire crackled. Wind moved through the grass. Stars stretched across the Wyoming sky. And then he saw Abby. She sat in the second row, watching him. Not with pressure, not with expectation, just belief. And somehow that changed everything. Mason adjusted the guitar strap, then spoke. This song, he swallowed. This is for the people who taught me what home sounds like. His eyes found his family. Wyatt, Charlie, Ellie, Sadie, Bo, then Caleb, the crew, the ranch, his people, and finally, Abby. Then he played. The first chord rang out across Heartland Ridge, warm, steady, true. His voice followed, strong and clear. He sang about sunrise over pasture grass, about worn boots and honest work, about strong hands and gentle hearts, about legacy, about love, about home. The song wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be, because it was real. Every lyric carried truth. Every note carried heart. When the final chord faded, silence followed. Complete silence. Then Charlie wiped her eyes. Which started it? Applause erupted. Loud, proud, heartfelt. Wyatt stood first, clapping hard. Caleb followed. Then everyone. Mason exhaled. Relief hit him all at once. He had done it. Later that night, after most guests had gone home, Mason stood alone near the fence, boots in grass, guitar at his side. Beautiful song. He turned. Abby, of course. She stepped beside him. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Abby smiled. You were wrong. Mason frowned. About what? She looked up at him. You asked if you were enough. He remembered. The fence, the fair, the fear. Abby's voice softened. Mason. She took one step closer. You already are. The words hit harder than applause ever could, because they came from someone who saw him. Not Wyatt's son, not the future owner. Just him. Before he could overthink it, Abby leaned up and kissed his cheek. Soft, quick, perfect. Then she stepped back. Mason stood frozen, completely stunned. Abby laughed, a warm, bright laugh he already loved. Good night, cowboy. She turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. Mason somehow found words. What? She smiled. I like the ma'am thing. Then she walked away. Mason somehow found words. What? She smiled. I like the ma'am thing. Then she walked away. Mason stood there grinning like an idiot. From the porch, Sadie's voice cut through the night. Mama! Mason froze. Sadie pointed dramatically. They kissed! Ellie buried her face in her hands. Bo shouted, I saw it too! Charlie laughed. Wyatt folded his arms, trying not to smile. Caleb failed completely. Mason closed his eyes. Of course, absolutely no privacy on this ranch. But as laughter filled the night and stars shone above Heartland Ridge, one truth settled deep in his heart. He no longer feared the future, because home wasn't something he had to carry alone. It was something built together. And for the first time, Mason truly understood. Heartland Ridge wasn't just his inheritance, it was his song. The end. Thank you for visiting Heartland Ridge Ranch. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Snowfall and Second Chances for more Western romance, unforgettable characters, and heartwarming stories from Heartland Ridge Ranch, where family legacy, Western romance, and second chances ride together.